You know the book The War of Art by Steven Pressfield? If you don't know it, it's oftentimes touted as like the creative block keystone book for people who have felt less than in their creative work in their life, whether they're blocked with it, whether they're feeling uninspired, whether they're feeling inadequate or impostery. This is the book that I think has inspired more people from like my generation, the Generation X, uh, to get up and get going, despite what the outcome is. Like the legitimacy of you being an artist does not depend on how much money you make, how renowned you are, how famous you are. It's literally about your relationship with the work. This is very linked to yoga. So we're going to try a new format today. We're going to try to connect the tenets of the War of Art by Steven Pressfield, which there are 9 of, and they're really cool. They're really great, inspirational kind of reminders of how to keep the work flowing. And we're going to look at the yoga philosophical parallels. And I think what we're going to find along the way is it's not too much of a stretch to connect what Pressfield is talking about to how we can interpolate that into the wide breadth of how yoga formats our relationship to reality, not just in the creative sense, but in all senses that are very in much alignment with the freedom and the empowerment that both projects, the one of yoga and the one of Steven Pressfield's, like trying to help you to get over your stuff so that you can do creative work. That empowerment is available to you. Let's get into it. Okay, so if you've read the book, you know that everything is founded upon this principle of resistance. Every reason why we can create an excuse for not doing the work, whether it's I'm not good enough, I don't have the time, I'm not making enough money, who do I think I am, all these kinds of things. I'm not skilled enough, I don't have the natural talent. It all comes down to this idea of resistance. And Pressfield basically says that like that is where the ground of war is. Of course, in yoga, it's not just about like getting over the resistance, it's like working with the resistance, being mindful with the resistance. And there's a couple different, I think, yoga philosophical parallels. There's obviously avidyā, the idea of misperception, the klesha of just not viewing things correctly. Oftentimes, what creates resistance for us in creative work, and I'm going to keep this one relatively focused on creative work because that's what the original book is about, but we can see how this translates on the mat, off the mat, writ large in the rest of our life as well. But when we are resistant of doing the work, sometimes it's because of we are expecting an outcome to be a specific way. And as we get into the work, we realize, oh, we're not quite there yet. It's not matching up with our expectations. So therefore, it's not working. We're not getting that invisible reward system, that feedback, that dopamine response. So we just put it to the side. We just quit. And then that just gives resistance, this anti-hero character in the plot, opportunity to just be doing push-ups, to just be working out. So the hardest part about creative work oftentimes is just starting. In yoga, this is not so dissimilar to like showing up on the mat, doing the pose, the hard thing. Obviously, in yoga, the poses are meant to be challenging. When you get to a point where the asana practice is no longer challenging you, it doesn't mean you're better than anybody or you've mastered it necessarily. It just means you might need to move on into the other aspects, the other limbs of yoga. So the question here for you as a yoga practitioner, where are you finding resistance in your yoga practice? I know when I work with advanced level teacher training and we start to incorporate practices that are not so common fare for public classes, things like yoga meditation, things like pranayama, things like nauli kriya. These things, holy cow, are they a fantastic opportunity to host this idea of interacting with resistance, because it is so uncomfortable. When you're learning the new technique, it is not rewarding and it does not give you the benefit or the outcome of what you might expect it to be until many months, sometimes years after getting into these kinds of practices. So resistance is sometimes really difficult because it's not connected to instant gratification. And again, this idea of the yoga crossover, resistance being misperception, or avidyā is one of the kleshas. That helps us to recognize that resistance isn't necessarily a real thing. Resistance sometimes, for me, is just about a feeling. Like I'm not in the mood to do the thing, so I don't do the thing. As I get older, I'm going to quote one of my favorite people here, who actually is a huge Steven Pressfield fan, Rich Roll. He's always talking about this: mood follows action. It's not the other, or excuse me, action follows mood. It's not the other way around. We can't just wait to be in the mood for inspiration to strike. That's not a reliable way to get into a steady, consistent rapport with our creative work, with our yoga practice. So, where is the resistance showing up for you? How are we misperceiving it? And maybe those things don't even matter, because what we have to do is just commit to showing up, to being present, to just doing the thing despite the resistance. Just know that sometimes the resistance is going to be there, and it's not wrong. It doesn't mean you're wrong either. Okay, so the next one is, his next tenet in the book is, the more you fear something, the more you must do it. There is another klesha called dveṣa, which is aversion. And the idea is that, well, rāga and dveṣa work together. Rāga is desire and dveṣa is aversion. And they work together because we cling to comfort. And we don't recognize that it's actually the avoidance of discomfort that keeps us more uncomfortable in the long run, right? So the idea that this distortion of truth via resistance keeps us from moving ourselves into the what we could call uncomfort zone, which is also the growth zone, facing the fear. Joseph Campbell talks about this a lot too in myth work, about facing the dragon. But when in yoga I'm working with teachers and teacher training, a lot of times this shows up in the way that people start teacher training and they're like, well, I don't know if I want to teach or not. And they're like, I know that I want to do teacher training because it's great for my own personal practice, but I'm not sure I want to take it to teaching. And that's perfectly fine. And sometimes they have a very valid reason for that. But sometimes that reason is baked into a fear of actually being seen, a fear of having to be accountable and responsible on a whole other level in their life, in their practice, in a way that actually kind of ends the honeymoon with your yoga practice. As soon as you start really committing yourself to the conceit of being a yoga teacher, the nature of your yoga practice changes. As I like to say, the honeymoon kind of ends, and that's a really good thing, because it pushes you into that uncomfortable place. It pushes you into the growth zone where your practice now becomes about your students in a way that the teaching is the thing that's actually serving you in the way that the practice used to. So it's a hard two-step process, because you're letting go of something that's very serviceable before you get the promise of the teaching. So your practice in this interim becomes this place of like, now it's about my students in a way where I may not be teaching yet, so I'm still not getting that cup filled that my practice used to service. And so that kind of tipsy-topsy world of facing the fear, there is real tax and cost to it, and that discomfort is where we grow. Okay, this next tenet: amateurs wait for motivation, professionals show up. So as I was saying earlier, I can't say it right. Mood follows action. When we take the action, the mood follows. If we wait for the mood, that's not the way to do it. Now he's talking, kind of transactionally. He's definitely kind of considering this in the art form of commerce, of like amateurs and professionals. But really, what we can think of this as is like, even like somebody who's really committed versus somebody who's like more of a tourist in their yoga practice. Like, I'm just trying it. Like, when you all know, when you cross that line of going from like the vacationer of like, yeah, I like to dabble with yoga from time to time, versus like, oh, yoga and we've gotten this to this place in our life where this relationship is, I can't miss my yoga practice. That's when you have begun to establish what Patanjali calls Abhyāsa. So Sutra 113, this is one half of what creates the bedrock for a foundational and long-term sustainable positive outcome in yoga. Having commitment and being convicted to your yoga practice through the highs, the lows, the honeymoons, the moon honeys, all the things. Yeah, so amateurs wait for motivation, professionals show up day in, day out, whether you feel like it or not, whether you don't want to not, whether you're working through an injury, whether teacher training is kind of like busted your yoga bubble or whatever, you keep showing up because that, if it's changing, that actually means you're growing. That's what you want to have happen. Okay, the next one he talks about for is turning pro. And so this is just a mindset shift. This isn't about waiting to get paid to be professional. It means how you incorporate your habits. So after the step of like deciding to show up every day, day in, day out, now how do you show up? And in yoga, a lot of times we talk about this concept of tapas. This is discipline. And a great teacher of mine, I'm sure he's not the first person to say this. I feel like I've heard a million people say this. But one time we hosted Dave Farmer, who's a great yoga teacher. And he said, and this is the first time I ever heard it. He said, how you do anything is how you do everything. And he was talking about side plank. We were holding side plank for a long time. And I couldn't agree more. I think that the perspective of turning pro means that you are fully on the hook for what you're doing. You're not trying to continue to foster the comfortable, safe space of misperception, of avidyā. So often our rāga and our dveṣa, these two kleshas that I talked about, the desire and aversion, they're working for this master klesha, avidyā, which is about maintaining false perception because that keeps us comfortable. It keeps us small, it keeps us safe, it keeps our bearings and orientation. Where what Steven Pressfield is talking about and what yoga is talking about is moving us into the purpose of these altered states is that so we're effectively allowing ourselves to risk transformation, to risk growth. And so when we practice with the mindset of like what a professional is, there's accountability there and there's discipline there. There's a devotion that goes beyond just like a wish, it's a need to stay in process with the practice where you're not so focused on the outcome, you're focused on the process. The practice becomes enriched in a whole different way where it doesn't matter at the end of any given practice or the end of any creative session, did I create my masterpiece? It's less about a finite destination and more about shifting towards to find the level of mastery of being in relationship with mastery, where it's not a destination, it's a continual process that requires us to be accountable, that requires us to have discipline, to have tapas, and to turn pro. What are you guys doing? Huh? What's going on? What's going on? Peter Johnson. Oh. Oh my. There we go. We got some action. There we go. Yeah. Good doggies. Good doggies. All right, next one is resistance loves comfort zones. So we've already talked about this, but where he gets into this just a little bit more is that the idea of comfort maintains what the status quo was, and discomfort is the thing that transforms. So there's nothing wrong in yoga with taking the same class. There's nothing wrong with teaching the same poses. The idea is that where are we forming the habit loop that is allowing us to look at the differential. Okay, let me explain. So if I do my yoga practice the same way over and over and over and over and over again, even if I'm doing the same postures, it should feel very, very different in 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, 3 years, right? The poses stay the same, but not only am I changing because I am just naturally, age as it tends towards entropy as we get older, but also how is it deepening? How is it enriching? What am I perceiving that's different? and where and what am I growing into on my yoga practice? The habit loops that keep us small are in yoga these things called samskaras, and it's finding the familiar patterns of what is known to you and making sure that the choices and the perspectives that we tend to attract ourselves to keep us doing the same thing over and over and over and over and over again. And there is a loop-like pattern to growth too. The idea is to make that loop-like pattern spiral upwards versus spiral down. So you do have to have some kind of way to gauge, am I honoring the comfort zone in the way that I am continuing to create commitment and habit around showing up all day, right? It says we're turning pro, that means I need to show up every day. But if I'm turning pro and I'm showing up every day and I'm just reinforcing these habit loops that keep me small, there's the problem. So the difference is checking in with, am I showing up every day, and is it about keeping things comfortable? And sometimes, by the way, here's the real tricky thing with that. Sometimes comfort is the novelty. Sometimes the habit loop that keeps us small is finding novelty in the practice. Sometimes it's about sticking with the same thing so much that it hits you right between the eyes with a subtle level of nuance that is so much more liminally enriching, more deep than novelty. Novelty is exciting, right? It keeps us, it's the thing that we can kind of hack this idea of like, how can I show up every day, every day, every day, every day? Well, if I keep something fresh, something new. But yoga doesn't require that. Yoga's asking us to look deeper, to take our time to see what we see, to hold that there for a time and recognize that it's going to change over time. That's a big picture right there. The next tenet Steven Pressfield talks about is self-doubt. He says self-doubt is normal. Don't let it stop you. So I actually want to talk about this in the parallel of vairagya, which is the other wing of the bird, as Iyengar says, to maintaining a foundational positive outcome in yoga, right? He says that yoga is achieved through practice, Abhyāsa, and non-attachment, which is vairagya. So self-doubt, imposter syndrome, those things are going to creep up whether we're teaching, whether we're practicing, whether we're trying to keep our yoga active and alive off the mat. And I want to encourage you all to just know that that self-doubt, that resistance is part of the discomfort. It's something that you're just going to have to engage with, and it's not always going to lead to a clean lesson. It's not always going to outcome in a way where you're like, oh, thank goodness I had that self-doubt because it really showed me this and this and this when I stuck with it. Sometimes the self-doubt is just there for whatever reason. It might just be something popping up in the field of your samskaras that might be interfacing with you in a way that doesn't have a huge, rich lesson to teach you. It's just there for you to have to move through. It's just part of the resistance for the resistance's sake. I can't tell you how many times there have been in my life where, as I've been teaching now for about 18 years, I have showed up thinking, man, I'm not in the mood to teach today. I'm not inspired to teach today. And who am I to teach? And I have all this self-doubt. Here are the questions, though. You may feel those things, but if you've been accountable, if you've been showing up as a pro and being pro in the way that you've been showing up, lean into that momentum, lean into that leverage that gives you, lean into the muscle memory that gives you, that accumulation of being committed in the small ways, simply just by watching this video too. But if you're not doing those things, sometimes self-doubt is a very real thing. However, Pressfield's point here is don't let it stop you. Even if you haven't been doing the things, sometimes you just got to let yourself kind of walk the plank, so to speak. And that might be the best thing for you to get you back on the horse, back on the wagon, whatever metaphor you want to use, to get into that commitment of being pro again with whatever it is, your practice, your creative work, or the relationships in your life. Okay, this next one, start before you're ready. Oh, So good. Yeah, I mean, I think about like what's the old stat? Michael Jordan missed 60,000 shots in his career, but it's the ones that he made that got him 6 championships. And I don't know if that stat's right in terms of how many shots he missed. He may have missed a whole lot more shots. But the guy who makes the most points is usually the one who misses the most shots. Be willing to fail, be willing to make it ugly. I remember in my teacher training, somebody said, actually, it was Laura, said, and I don't know if these were her, this is another one of those things that probably just came down through the grapevine, but she said, as you're learning this, as you're in the discomfort of all of it, you're going to just have to suck before you can shine. It's kind of like a little bit more of a, I'm going to say a Gen X way of saying fake it till you make it, right? So in yoga, starting before you're ready, well, in one hand, it can be about like the beginner mindset, right? Like being open-minded, being devotional, just just trusting, having faith. In yoga, there's this concept of shraddha, and this oftentimes is related to faith, but one definition of it that I really like from Gregor Mall, he talks about it as conviction. And you may not be ready to start, and you may not know what you're doing, and you may be underwater with it or out to sea with it, whatever metaphor you want to put there. But if you get going, if you act with faith or conviction, with shraddha, you have to work. You have to learn. You have to earn. And that is Abhyāsa. That is the practice. That is overcoming the resistance. And again, you know, this is all a practice. It's not a perfect. I mean, writ large, yoga is a practice. Life is, you can kind of say life is a practice. I don't know what for, for graduating at some point when we all die, but the only one keeping score here really is you. So start before you're ready. Okay, number 8, create a daily routine that is non-negotiable. Yep, yep. So this is like your sadhana, right? So in yoga, sadhana is your spiritual practice. These are the ways in which you connect to self and to something greater and to your sankalpa and your intention every single day. So in our 300-hour teacher training, we do, a very traditional sadhana. We do, chanting, we do sankalpa, we do asana, we do kriya, we do pranayama, we do meditation, deep relaxation. You don't have to do all those things. Sometimes for me, right now, my morning sadhana looks like Nawali Kriya. It looks like I read a poem every day. Right now, I'm reading some bhakti poetry and Andrea Gibson every single day, which you could consider her poems bhakti as well, by the way, like postmodern bhakti. I journal every morning, and then every night I finish the day with my pranayama and meditation, and that's the schedule. That's the syncing for me. That's what keeps me in the game. That keeps me engaged with resistance, because even after I've been stacking as many days as I stack, and when I need to change it, I change it, but it's keeping me accountable. And that's really what I mean to say when I use the word pro, right? There's no pro yoga, right? It's not like a professional yogi or whatever. Well, I guess there kind of is. I mean, as a yoga teacher who makes money, but what matters more than that is even as a yoga teacher or a yoga student, whether you're making money for it or whether you're just dedicating yourself with devotion, it's about being accountable. So creating a daily routine, even a few minutes. Here's my big thing is never have a nothing day. I listed off a lot of things I do every day, and I do more than that, in fact, too. But I've been working on this for almost 20 years. So if I would have offered that to myself 20 years ago, there'd be no way. But if I could just do one thing every day, if I could just reflect maybe that's the one thing I do every day. So daily routine, never have a nothing day. Oh boy, the final one, and maybe, I don't know, I probably said this already. This one might be the most important. There's so many important ones. Your work matters. Do it anyway. That's what he says. And it's not about ego. It's not about reward. Your work is about contribution. In yoga, we have this concept of dharma. Dharma is not just like on one hand, Dharma is about yourself, like who you are and your role in the world, but it's also about your purpose within your kind of particular identity. So what you are meant to provide and what you're meant to be of service with in the world. And so Dharma and this concept of seva is service. These are yoga terms off the mat that help kind of keep the focus of us moving past like the small stuff of our ego that helps build up that resistance to just be like, but what if I don't get paid to do it? What if people laugh at me? What if people criticize me on the internet? What if trust me, I get all that stuff. Like it's hard to even make these videos, even doing it this many years and knowing that I'm going to make mistakes and people are going to have problems with it, or there's going to be things I don't do right and things people, but the things that I get right, if I get that right for somebody, that matters more anyway. And sure, I'm happy to learn and give me feedback in the comments of things I missed and things that would have worked better for some of these crossovers. But for you watching this, I'm assuming that you're like me. You're continually trying to stoke the fire of inspiration around your creative work, around your yoga practice, around your yoga teaching, and then maybe even the way that you're living your yoga off the mat, and being finely attuned, making sure that those daily practices, going back one step, make sure those daily practices are continually connecting the things that I'm choosing every single day, whether it's thoughts, emotions, and actions, they're all connected to purpose. And that purpose has to serve something greater than just myself. So that's my hope with these videos. That's my hope for you. And that is what a fantastic way to end these 9 tenets of the art of war, which if you were going to translate even the title to yoga, it might be the yoga of perpetuality or the yoga of practice. Maybe that's the easy way to say it. Okay, so whether you call it resistance, whether you call it the fluctuations of the mind, remember that when we're doing creative work, when we're doing our yoga practice, and to me, I'm going to start to get into a lot more videos that are going to tie the bridge between the creative process and yoga, because to me, they are inextricable and they are the same thing in so many ways for me. We're going to continue to explore this concept that it's not outcome and result oriented, that it's practice and process oriented. And I hope that this video helped kind of identify some of the ways for you that maybe like whatever zinged for you as we went through these 9, like what's the one that's holding you back from just finding a little bit more ease in which you want to relate to the way in which you're creating, you're manifesting, you're showing up and taking care of yourself, because that's also the biggest part of all this stuff, right? We forget that creative work is kind of like a vitamin. It's the other vitamin C. And I do think that our yoga practice has to be creative. And sometimes there's no better way to be creative than to limit the yoga practice and to keep it consistent, to just do the thing for some period of time, really dig deep into that spaciousness of liminal relationship with your yoga practice. So remember that Pressfield, Patanjali, whoever you want to look at for inspiration, these are people who, like so many others, who've given the world a great gift by taking the risk to be seen, to be vulnerable, to overcome resistance, to show up, to be pro, and to just move through the self-doubt enough so that they did the work, because it does matter, and you don't have to prove yourself to anyone through your work or through your practice. That's not what it's about. Showing up is the proof. Doing the thing is all the proof that you need. So until next time, stay convicted. Let me know what I missed, what your thoughts are in the comments. And I so appreciate you watching. Bye-bye.